Grant is 62 years old, and right now his finger is hovering over a button that could erase 11 years of careful planning. It's a little after 9 in the evening. The house is quiet, the kind of quiet that only shows up after the kids have moved out and the television's been off for an hour. The only light in the room is the pale glow of his laptop screen. And on that screen is a number, his retirement account. Down. Not down a little, down the kind of amount that makes your stomach drop, the kind of red that makes the whole market feel like it's coming apart at once. His cursor is resting on 2 words: sell everything. I want you to freeze that moment with me, because Grant isn't reckless. He isn't a gambler. He's a careful man who did everything right for 3 decades. And he is about to make the single most expensive mistake of his financial life, not because he's foolish, but because every instinct in his body is screaming at him to do it. Here's what Grant doesn't know in this moment. Nearly a century ago, a man named Benjamin Graham wrote a book to prevent exactly this. It's called The Intelligent Investor. It runs over 600 pages, and it's widely considered the greatest book on investing ever written. And the most successful investor alive, Warren Buffett, a man who studied directly under Graham, said something almost heretical about it. He said you can skip almost the whole thing. 600 pages, and Buffett told ordinary investors to hold on to just 2 chapters. 2. Everything else, in his words, is optional. So, here's the question this whole video is built around. Which 2? What did the greatest investor of our time think was so important that he'd throw out the other 590 pages to protect it? I'll tell you. But there's a twist almost nobody talks about, and it's the reason I made this video. Because there's a third lesson. One Buffett left off his list entirely, and that third lesson is the one that quietly does the work of the other 2 for you without you having to be brave or disciplined or even paying attention at the worst possible moment. That third lesson is the one that would have saved Grant tonight. Now, here's the strange part about all 3 of these lessons. On the surface, every single one sounds like beginner advice. Stuff you'd roll your eyes at, don't panic, don't overpay, keep a balanced portfolio. You've heard it 100 times. But that's the trap. Because after 55, these 3 plain little ideas stop being beginner advice and turn into something else entirely. The thin line between the person who keeps what they built and the person who hands it back to the market in a single bad decade. Let me show you why. Graham had a way of explaining the stock market that I've never seen anyone improve on. He asked you to imagine you own a small business, and you have a partner. Let's call him Mr. Market. Now, Mr. Market is a strange fellow. Every single day, without fail, he shows up at your door and shouts a price. He'll tell you what he thinks your share of the business is worth, and he offers to either buy you out at that price or sell you his share for the same. Some days he's cheerful wildly, giddily optimistic, and the number he shouts is absurdly high. Other days he's terrified, convinced the whole thing is going to zero, and he shouts a number that's insultingly low. And here's the key. Mr. Market doesn't mind if you ignore him. He'll be back tomorrow with a brand new number. His feelings aren't hurt. He has no memory of yesterday. Graham's point was simple. Mr. Market is there to serve you, not to instruct you. His daily mood is not information about what your business is worth. It's just his mood. Now, if you're an experienced person, and if you're watching this, you probably are. I know the reflex. You hear this little parable and you think, okay, that's a cute way of saying, don't panic. Buy low, sell high, don't let your emotions run the show. Beginner stuff, and that is exactly the misread that costs people the most money after 60. Because the reality Graham was pointing at is deeper than don't panic. The trap isn't just fear. There are 2 sides to Mr. Market, and almost everybody only guards against one of them. Side 1 is the one we all recognize the terror. That's Grant tonight, finger on the button, ready to sell into the crash because the low number Mr. Market is shouting feels like the truth. That's the retiree who bails at the bottom and locks in the loss forever. But side 2 is just as dangerous, and hardly anybody talks about it. Side 2 is the euphoria. It's the person who watches something climb and climb, sees everyone around them making money, and buys in at the top paying Mr. Market's giddiest, most inflated price because missing out feels unbearable. That's the person still building their nest egg, chasing whatever went up the most last year. Fear and greed aren't 2 different mistakes. They're the same mistake. Both of them are letting Mr. Market's mood become your decision. Both of them are treating his shout as a fact instead of a feeling. Let me make this concrete, because I've watched both sides wreck people. Back in the late 1990s, the euphoria side had folks pouring their life savings into technology companies that had never earned a single dollar buying, purely because the price kept climbing and the neighbor was getting rich. Mr. Market was manic, and they mistook his mania for opportunity. When it all collapsed, a lot of them never came back. Now flip it forward. In 2008, and again in the spring of 2020, the terror side took the wheel. Sensible, hardworking people sold everything they owned at almost the exact bottom, locking in losses that would have healed completely if they'd simply done nothing. Same partner, opposite mood, same devastating result, letting his emotion make their decision for them. And here's the uncomfortable part, especially for those of us who've been around a while. Experience can actually make this worse, not better. When you're seasoned, you trust your own read on things, and that confidence is exactly what convinces you that this time you really can tell what the market is worth just by how it feels. But feeling is Mr. Market's entire game. The more certain you are that you can read his mood, the more completely you've handed him the wheel. And I want to be honest about why this hits harder now than it would have at 35. When you're young, both errors are survivable. You buy at the top, you've got 3 decades for the market to bail you out. You panic and sell at the bottom, painful, but there's a paycheck coming Friday and 30 years to rebuild. After 55, that runway is gone. This is the part I feel strongly about because I've watched it happen to people. The euphoria mistake and the panic mistake both used to be temporary. Now they're permanent. There's no 30-year cushion left to absorb them. The stakes didn't change because you got worse at investing. They changed because time stopped being on your side. So let me bring us back to Grant, sitting there in the glow of that screen. Which side of Mr. Market is whispering to him right now? The terror, obviously. The low number feels like a prophecy, like if he doesn't act now, he'll lose everything. But Mr. Market has no idea what Grant's business is actually worth. He never did. He's just a frightened man shouting a frightened number. And Graham's whole point is that Grant is allowed, encouraged to simply close the door and let him shout. Here's the problem though, and this is the honest limit of this first lesson. Just ignore Mr. Market sounds wonderful on a calm evening. But how, exactly, are you supposed to know when his number is crazy and when it's fair? How do you shut the door with confidence if you have no independent sense of what things are actually worth? Ignoring the shout is only half the discipline. You need the other half, a way to know what a sane price even looks like. And that, it turns out, is the second chapter Buffett told you to keep. Let me start this one away from the stock market entirely, because it lands better that way. Imagine an engineer designing a bridge. She figures out that the heaviest load the bridge will ever realistically carry is, say, 10,000 pounds at once. So does she build it to hold exactly 10,000 pounds? Of course not. She'd be fired. She builds it to hold 30,000, maybe more. Why? Because she isn't just planning for the expected day. She's planning for the terrible unexpected one, the freak storm, the overloaded truck, the material that was slightly weaker than the spec sheet promised. That gap, the difference between what the bridge can survive and what it's ever likely to face, is her cushion against everything she can't predict. Graham took that exact idea and put it at the center of investing. He called it the margin of safety. And Graham himself wrote that if you forced him to compress the whole secret of sound investing into just 3 words, those 3 words would be it: margin of safety. In plain terms, never pay full price for what you think something is worth. Always insist on a gap between the price you pay and the value you're getting. Buy $1 of value for 70 cents, not for $1.05. That gap is your protection against being wrong, and you will sometimes be wrong. Now here comes the misread again. People hear margin of safety and think it's a rule for the timid. A rule for people who are scared of the market, who don't believe in growth, who want to hide. If you're an optimist, if you believe in the long-term future, why handicap yourself by demanding a discount on everything? The margin of safety has nothing to do with being afraid. It's not emotional at all, it's arithmetic. Cold, brutal arithmetic, and it gets more merciless with every year you age. Let me show you the math Graham understood and most people never stop to work out. Suppose you lose 50% of your money. A brutal drop, but not a rare one. The market has done it. How much do you need to gain just to get back to where you started? Most people's gut says 50%. It feels symmetrical. 50 down, 50 up, even again. It's not. If you lose half your money, you need to double what's left a 100% gain just to break even. Not 50, 100. The hole is always deeper to climb out of than it was to fall into. A 30% loss needs a 43% gain to recover. A 50% loss needs 100. The deeper you fall, the more savagely the math works against you. And this is the whole reason the margin of safety exists. It's not about fear. It's about never letting yourself fall into a hole that deep in the first place. Refuse to overpay, always demand that cushion, and you simply never take the kind of loss that requires a miracle to undo. Let me put a face on overpaying, because it's actually more common than getting caught in a crash. Say a company is genuinely excellent, real earnings, a real future, nothing wrong with the business at all. But the crowd has fallen in love with it and bid the price up so high that you're paying $40, $50 for every single dollar it earns in a year. You didn't buy junk. You bought something wonderful at a terrible price. And when the enthusiasm cools, it always cools. Even a great company can cut your money in half. Not because the business failed, but because you paid for perfection and got merely very good. That's the trap the margin of safety closes. The quality of what you buy never protects you if the price you paid left no room to be wrong. Graham's insight was that the price is the protection, not the product. Now, connect that to your age. When you were 30, that hole had a way out that had nothing to do with the market, your income. You could lose badly and just keep shoveling paychecks into the account until it healed. Your job was your margin of safety. After you retire, that shovel is gone. No paycheck is coming to refill the hole. The only margin of safety you have left is the one you built into your prices before the fall. For the person still accumulating, don't overpay, even when everything is rushing upward and it feels like free money. For the person already living off the portfolio, that cushion is the difference between a scary year and a permanent wound. I'll be straight with you. This is the lesson I wish someone had drilled into me 20 years earlier. It's not exciting. Nobody makes a fortune bragging about the deals they didn't overpay for. But it's the quiet thing that separates the people who stay retired from the people who have to go back to work. So now you got 2 chapters. 1, ignore Mr. Market's moods. 2, demand a margin of safety so his moods can't hurt you. These are the 2 Buffett said to keep, and together they're a complete philosophy. But here's the crack in it, the honest human crack. Knowing these 2 things and doing them in the moment, under pressure, those are completely different skills. It's easy to nod along on a calm evening. It's a very different thing to hold the line at 9 at night when your account is bleeding red and every cell in your body is screaming, sell. Willpower is exactly the thing that fails at the precise moment Mr. Market shouts loudest. Graham knew that, which raises a question. What if you didn't have to rely on willpower at all? What if you could build the discipline into a system so ignoring Mr. Market and honoring your margin of safety happened automatically whether you felt brave that night or not? There is a way, and it's the lesson Buffett left off the list. Here's the 3rd lesson, the one that isn't chapter 8 or chapter 20. The one that didn't make Buffett's short list, and yet, for an ordinary person, might be the most important of the 3. It's in one of the earliest chapters of the book, and on the surface, it's the least glamorous idea Graham ever put forward. It's a rule about how to split your money. Specifically, Graham's rule for the everyday defensive investor was this: never hold less than 25% of your money in stocks, and never more than 75%. The rest goes into bonds, safe, boring, interest-paying bonds, and the natural resting point, the default, sits right in the middle. 50% stocks, 50% bonds. That's it. That's the lesson. And I know exactly how it sounds. It sounds like the dullest, most dated, one-size-fits-all formula you've ever heard. A relic, something out of a yellowed textbook that couldn't possibly apply to a modern market. That's the misread, and it's the biggest of the 3, because it misses something genuinely beautiful about what Graham built. This isn't a formula, it's a machine. Let me show you what I mean, because this is the part that made me sit up when I really understood it. The rule doesn't just sit there. It forces you to act, and it forces you to act in exactly the right direction at exactly the moment your emotions want to send you the wrong way. Picture it. Stocks go on a tear, everything's up, Mr. Market is euphoric, everyone at the barbecue is bragging about their gains. As stocks climb, they take up more and more of your portfolio, 60%, 65%, creeping toward that 75% ceiling. And the rule says, when you hit the ceiling, you must sell some stocks and move the money into bonds to get back to balance. Read that again. The rule forces you to sell stocks when everyone is euphoric and prices are high. It forces you to take money off the table at the top, the exact thing Mr. Market is begging you not to do. Now flip it. The crash comes, stocks collapse. This is Grant's night. Stocks fall so far, they now make up only 40% of your portfolio, then 30%, sliding toward that 25% floor. And the rule says, when you hit the floor, you must buy stocks using your safe bond money to get back to balance. The rule forces you to buy stocks when everyone is terrified and prices are low. It forces you to buy at the bottom the exact thing Grant, frozen at his screen, cannot make himself do. Let me put real numbers on it so it stops being abstract. Say you start at the 50-50 default with $100,000, $50,000 in stocks, $50,000 in bonds. Stocks go on a run, and now your stock side is worth $75,000 while your bonds still sit at $50,000. You've quietly drifted to 60% stocks. The rule tells you to sell about $12,000 of stock right when everyone around you is euphoric and bragging, and move it into bonds back toward your target. Then the crash comes and cuts your stocks down to 30,000. Now you're under 40% stocks, and the very same rule tells you to buy pulling money out of bonds and into stocks at the bottom while everyone else is sprinting for the exit. Notice you never predicted a thing. You didn't call the top or the bottom. The drift itself told you what to do. And how often do you actually do this? Not daily watching it every day, just feeds the anxiety and tempts you to meddle. Once or twice a year, or whenever your mix drifts far enough from target, is plenty. The entire point is to pull the decision out of the heat of the moment and hand it to a rule you set when you were calm. Do you see what just happened? The allocation rule executes both of the other lessons for you. It ignores Mr. Market's mood automatically better than ignore, it profits from him. And it enforces a margin of safety automatically, because it never lets you get dangerously overexposed at the top. You don't need willpower, you don't need to be brave at 9 at night. You just follow the rule and rebalance back to your target now and then. And it flexes for both kinds of people watching. Still building and can genuinely stomach more risk? Anchor toward the 75% stock ceiling. Retired and protecting what you've got? Anchor toward the 50-50 middle, or lean more conservative within the band. Same machine, same automatic discipline against emotion. It just meets you where you are. So we have to answer the question this whole video has been circling. If this lesson is so powerful, if it does the work of the other two automatically, why did Buffett leave it off his list? Why point you to Mr. Market and the margin of safety, but not to this? Here's my honest read, and it's the most important thing I'll say in this whole video. The two chapters Buffett kept are about mindset, how to think, and Buffett can afford to lead with mindset because Buffett has, by temperament, almost superhuman emotional discipline. He can hold the right mindset in a crash without a system forcing his hand. For someone built like Buffett, the mindset is enough. But you and I are not built like Buffett. Almost nobody is. For a normal human being, one with a pulse and fear and a stomach that drops when the screen turns red, mindset alone is not enough. Willpower cracks at the worst moment. And that's precisely why the lesson Buffett could afford to leave off is the one the rest of us need most. He gave you the philosophy. The allocation rule is the thing that survives your worst night, the mechanism that acts correctly even when you can't. Which brings us back to Grant. Here's the thing about his terrible moment at the screen. If Grant had been running Graham's rule, if he'd simply set his split and agreed to rebalance to it, that moment never happens. There's no agonizing finger over the sell button. The decision was already made, months ago, in a calm room. The crash doesn't ask him to be brave. It just triggers the rule. Stocks dip below the floor, so the plan quietly tells him to buy a little, not sell everything. The panic has nothing to grab onto because there's no decision left to make. That's the whole thing. A partner you refuse to obey, a cushion you refuse to give up, and a machine that enforces both while you sleep. So, let me ask you the only question that actually matters tonight. Forget what you thought of the video. Right now, in your own account, which button is your finger hovering over? Are you the one about to chase the top, or the one about to sell the bottom? Grant never had to answer that. His rule answered for him. Long before the bad night ever came, the plan had already decided, so the fear had nothing left to break. That's the quiet gift Graham left for people with the most to lose. Not a way to feel braver in the storm, a way to make the storm stop mattering. And if you want to see exactly how to set that split for your own age and your own nerves, that's the next thing you and I should talk about. I'll meet you there.